Hi, and welcome back to Continual. Tonight, we are going around and talking about the joys of holiday horror. What says holidays like a bloodbath in the morning. But before we dive into that, I'm going to be your host, Jim Nettles, and let's go around the room and see who has decided to come in and join us. So, Samantha, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bryant. I'm best known for my menopausal superheroes series, but I also write a lot of horror. I've got a little pile of it sitting here behind me. My horror tends to come out short form and scares the heck out of me. I always say my work is half hero and half horror, which is also a description of my day job as a middle school teacher.
I still insist that's more horror than, but anyway. Selah?
Thank you for that. Hey, I'm Selah Janel. I write a lot of fantasy, dark fantasy, horror. I've done a lot of short fiction. I've been had a lot of magazine releases this year. I do a lot of ebooks. I love folklore-based horror. I love it. I love creepy legends, all that good stuff. I'm down for any of that, and Christmas has so much of it, and I love it all.
Jonathan?
I'm Jonathan Mayberry. I'm a New York Times bestselling author in a bunch of different genres. I write horror, thriller, science fiction, fantasy, and a bunch of others. And I write comics written for Marvel, IDW, and Dark Horse. And I edit Weird Tales magazine. And we just launched a Weird Tales novel imprint, and we're gearing up with that with Blackstone. So I'm a little bit all over the place. And I also had a TV show called V Wars that was on 2 years ago today, actually. It launched.
Like I said, nothing like zombies for the holidays. I really have had caffeine today sometime. Lisa.
That was a good word you were trying to make up there, though.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Elmarie Wood. I'm a psychological horror author. I like the quieter side of horror, so Christmas is perfect for that because it's cold and creepy, and the tree's going and the glow is happening, but there could be something creeping around the corner. So that's kind of fun for me. I write novels predominantly, but I've done some short fiction as well. Oh, and screenplays. I guess that's true too.
A few awards-winning screenplays, just a couple.
Just a couple, yeah.
So let's start off with the idea of what is it that attracts everybody to the horror and the holidays? And it's got to be more than just, some of the bad cooking and stuff. What is it? I mean, traditionally we know that this time of year really pulls in, and it's about us confronting fears. We're going into the winter, we're going into the season of death and all that sort of thing. But where is it that really, because we have both the celebrations of life and joy and all the things that go on, as well as the creepier side of life. So what is it for you that really pulls you in and draws you in to it? So Samantha, I'm going to start with you.
So this time of year, I always fall into ghost stories, and I think it has something to do with time by a fire, that old tradition of let's just scare each other while we're sitting here in the dark and the cold. Probably starting back with things like Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol when I was a little kid. It was a ghost story that I was allowed. But I tend to find myself some Shirley Jackson to reread around this time of year. If I get the chance, I love to do The Turn of the Screw. A couple of years, my husband and I have sat up and read that out loud to each other, and that makes for a great holiday cozy kind of feeling. And I can't really explain why, but I find ghost stories cozy. They just make me, I guess by scaring me and then letting me be safe at the same time, they just leave me feeling good. And that's what I like about it.
Lisa?
The cold, I think, for me, and it's funny, Samantha just mentioned like Turn of the Screw is one of my favorites. I actually did a puzzle last Christmas season while listening to it. So it was just amazing. And again, the ghost story piece. But the cold and the dark, I feel like the two go together. And when I'm cold, I'm so uncomfortable. I don't like to be cold. So when it just gets to the bone, there's so much there. Now it's the whole physical reaction that I personally have to the cold, which is try to find a blanket. Oh, that's not enough. Get some socks. Oh, that's not enough. Get a heater. Get in front of the heater. It's not enough. And but now it's dark outside and you're so cold you can barely move, and you can't get away from whatever could be frightening you. Because for me, in Halloween, we start the process, right? I mean, for one, I think about Halloween and scary stuff all year, but the process truly begins at Halloween for most people. And it's beginning to get cold, depending upon what part of the world you're living in. So that sticks, and it gets colder and darker and cold. So there's so many ways, there's so many things to think about in that time period, so much reflection to have that, that's just the beginning of it for me. And it always brings in that fear.
Selah?
I think Lisa has a really good point. I think, Halloween starts the cycle, if we're thinking about the whole holiday calendar, like from Halloween to Candlemas. So Halloween, we really start getting into the cold times, the dark times, and reflecting on, who we've lost and things like that. And I think by the time we get to Christmas, for me, I mean, I love Christmas, not gonna lie, but I think in our modern society, there's such a push for the happy, and we gotta celebrate everything, and it's all the sparkly, all the happy, happy, happy all the time. And we forget that there's this other part. This is the dead time of the year. This is the be lucky you're alive time of year. And I think in European traditions and other traditions, there's that character or other side of it that kind of, is the other side of the coin that we don't have in America. So for me, the horror genre, holiday themed horror, winter themed horror really helps kind of balance us too. I mean, I know I've had personal tragedies right before Christmas and in December, and it can be a hard month. I mean, I think it's something we shouldn't ignore, that it can be a very happy time, but a very hard time. And I think the genre can really reflect on that as well.
How about you, Jonathan?
First off, a little bit of what everybody said. So that, that those are all superb points. But one of the things about Christmas and spookiness that kind of caught me as a kid, during the summer, even during part of the fall, if you're home, the windows are open. There are sounds intruding from outside. You're not really as contained as you are when it gets cold and the windows are shut. Mm-hmm. It gets quiet in the house, and you hear the house. I grew up in row homes in Philadelphia, and they were old. I mean, they were really old, and they made all sorts of sounds. And we had, I grew up in the 60s. We had a coal furnace. So, you had to go down and actually shovel coal, and you had that glowing, weird, red fire in this big old machine. But you also had the creaks and sounds of the vents and everything. All of that made the season creepy. Now, granted, when people are around and there's music and so on, and it crowds out that noise, then you're a little more festive. But there are so many times throughout a winter that the house gets quiet and you hear it, and it seems to be alive and in some degree of pain or discomfort. And that conjures images of spooky things, of old memories the house contains, and maybe people who have died there. Like my grandmother, when she was dying, she stayed with us the last few months of her life. She spent the last few months of her life in my bedroom. I slept on the couch, and she died in that room. So here I am after she died, having to go back and reclaim that, and just sitting there and hearing the house and listening for her. It has its creepiness. And plus, trees die. We know it's going to come back, but by Christmas, it's only really the beginning of summer. We have a long way to go before the light comes back strong, the warmth comes back, and green comes back. So we're kind of caught in the mystery of living in a dead world. That's what it feels like. So the fact that this holiday shows up, and a lot of different holidays are show up around here, going back to Etruscan times and Greeks and so on, all these different holidays that collide at this time of year. You have all of those memories, all those traditions layered on top of one another, and it's an uneasy alliance of all those things. So I can't imagine anyone not getting through a Christmas holiday without being creeped out by something.
Well, if we look at coming into this time of year, I mean, pretty much every culture, at least in the northern hemisphere, has a major celebration around this time. We're looking at the solstice. We're looking at, Saturnalia, a lot of ancient traditions we brought to the modern day. But I mean, for Christmas, for example, that really was not a major holiday in a lot of Western tradition until we had Dickens and A Christmas Carol. and a number of the stories that came out around that time that really sort of brought back in that idea that started creating the holiday as it is today. What is it? What's the story for you? What's that first real sort of dark, haunting story from this time of year that really kind of touched you? I mean, there's a couple of them that none of us can get away because they're foundational for all of us. But so Lisa, how about you? What's the first one that really got you?
Yeah, you picked me first for that, right? Because mine is actually the Dickens tale. When I consume holiday horror, I watch it. It's on film for me more so than reading it. But the Dickens story, I mean, it's creepy. And every film iteration has not been as scary as I was hoping it would be, if you will. And I'm planning to watch, December 1st is tomorrow. So I'll be watching, the 30 days, however many days we're going to do it, probably just 25 days of horror Christmas type of things. And I think that one might be first on our list. But the ghosts are not ever as frightening as I envision them to be, because the concept of the ghosts of Christmas past coming to visit me and show me all these horrendous things. And then forget the future. The past is I already remember it. Do not bring it back to me and terrify me with it. And it's just the creepiest thing ever when you think about how casually that story was told to us. Lots of things that, as we will move further in, are told to us, in certain ways that are just sort of casual. Around this time, Santa coming down the chimney and all of the just the night before Christmas poem. I mean, it just, in general, this is all very creepy in just a general sense. And I found that to be so when I was a child. So when we read A Christmas Carol as a child, I was one of the only kids going, anybody hearing this? Is anybody hearing how frightening this is? So yeah, that's when I revisit. That's one that I definitely like to watch. And it's still scary to me to this day.
Selah?
Oh gosh. I definitely would agree with that. I just remember, like, you got me thinking about, there was this PBS version of A Christmas Carol, and they would always like do the commercial with like him at the grave, and like it was like the reveal, and that still is like burned into my memory because it always freaked me out as a kid. I was such a scaredy cat kid. But yeah, like that would be like, I could not watch the full version of that because no. But oh gosh, these days, like I tend to always look for new stuff. I really do. I have like a personal mission to like go through and keep finding new like folklore stories and things like that, because that really fascinates me. And like, as successful as Krampus is, like that's the tip of the iceberg. There's so many, and some are cooler, honestly. But so I'm really into and I can't pronounce them to save my life. I'm into Icelandic stories right now about the Yule lads and the Yule cat that eats you if you don't get new clothes for Christmas. I love it so much. Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
It's fantastic. They're amazing. But I will say, and I really like Joe Hill's Nosferatu. So for years I had I was in costume design and build for a theme park, and we did like Halloween events and stuff like that. And for years we did have a holiday maze, and so it was really hard to impress me with Christmas horror because it's very easy to be schlocky. It's very easy to be cartoony and just be like, okay, whatever. And I feel like, although I don't like, there are parts of the book I'm kind of lukewarm about, I feel like he gets it really well. There's that sense of cold and dread, and it's not overly schlocky. It hits the right notes. So that, and I would probably say A Christmas Horror Story. I think I have that right. It's the anthology film with William Shatner as the framing device on it, where he's like a DJ, and it's like 4 different things. And it's like there's a Krampus story. There's a changeling story, which is really different. And there's a couple others. There's like zombie elves or something, but it comes together in a really cool way. And for that, that really got me thinking that there are actually like Christmas horror movies that do it well. So I'm always sort of searching for stuff like that.
So Jonathan?
I'm going back to Christmas Carol. I mean, it's a really important book for me. It's the second novel I ever read that I chose to read as opposed to being assigned to me. First one was Haunting of Hill House, and then I read A Christmas Carol. And it's elegant writing. It's beautiful. It has so much story packed into what is little more than a novella. I mean, it's a very short novel, but it hits the notes really beautifully. And I do agree with what Marie said, that the movies aren't as scary as the book, because the thing about novels, the reason I like them, is a good writer invites the reader to co-create the story with them. Dickens did not over describe his characters, and that invited us to be able to conjure that. That said, there are versions of the movie. I love almost every version of A Christmas Carol. I don't do the cartoon versions. I can't do the Muppet version anymore. It's a little too cute. But there are some versions of it that I think are absolutely stellar and do hit horror notes. My favorite being the George C. Scott version. The Ghost of Christmas Future is scary as hell.
Yeah.
And also the fact that it is done with the least amount of bombacity. I mean, the characters are not bigger than life. They're real people. They're played subtly by the actors, which is an incredibly great cast. And as a result, it invites you in to believe it more than some of the others where every character's overacting and chewing the scenery. This is not that. Scrooge's George C. Scott's performance as Scrooge is brilliant, but Frank Finlay rather steals the show with his Marley. He's so tragically sad that's its own kind of horror. Horror does not have to be monster scary. Horror can sometimes be relating, in an empathic moment where we relate to an emotion that is profoundly, frightening to us. I grew up poor. I grew up in an abusive household. So I understand pain and tragedy, and seeing a character embody it in himself, knowing that that's his entire future forever is regret. I mean, holy crap. And there's this new version of it. It's really weird take on it with Guy Pearce, which came out a couple of years ago, which is a very adult version of Christmas Carol, changing the dynamic completely, which makes it disturbing in its own way, a completely different way. So I love the book. I listened to the audiobook, probably 5 different versions of it each year. I'm just started the Jim Dale version. And I probably watch 10 versions of the movie every year. It's superb storytelling, and it definitely influenced me in how I wanted to tell stories when I grew up. So,
well, there's the real horrors growing up. Speaking of going to the middle school teacher, so Samantha, how about you?
So, well, as Jim knows, I don't know if the rest of you know, I'm Jewish and married to a Catholic guy. So we do Christmaka at our house. And so my experience with Christmas is a little different maybe than others who grew up like within Christianity. I always thought it was interesting, but not really my thing. So I haven't really sought out necessarily Christmas stories. I think of it more like the winter holiday season and that kind of thing. But one that I have had affection for a really long time, speaking of schlocky and cartoony, is Gremlins.
Yeah.
Gremlins, the movie, right, from the 80s.
Yeah.
And I think that's the movie that kind of established for me a love of horror comedy blends that has stayed with me to this day. When they're done right, they just please me on every front. And the Gremlins definitely had some moments that scared me, especially when I was a child. I didn't find it as scary the most recent time I watched it, darn it, but I'm getting harder to scare. But there's still once the Gremlins have gone bad, they're really creepy looking, and you've also got cute and adorable, and you've got the horror of family dynamics and bad people in your own town, that kind of personal level horror. So I think Gremlins is the one I can think of that I've had affection for the longest, except for maybe Dickens. But you guys talk the Dickens out of Dickens, so I'll let that one go.
Yeah, but the good news is the Gremlins could always be beaten by a ceiling fan. So
Oh, I love my favorite scene now that because I just watched it fairly recently with the teenager. And my favorite scene watching it now at the phase of life I'm in now is when the mom kills all those gremlins with her kitchen appliances.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah. Go girl.
Entertainment.
Oh my God, yeah.
So when we look at these stories, what is it about these stories that draws you in? I mean, because again, it, as Jonathan was saying, it's the co-creation experience between the author and the reader. So when you're reading a story or you're watching a story, whatever it is, what are the elements that really draw you in and connect it? Do you want the existential dread? Do you want that blend of comedy and horror? Because they're really two sides of that same coin. What is it that is going to pull you in and hold you and give you what you're looking for out of that seasonal type of a horror? So, Selah, I'm gonna go with you first.
It depends on my mood. If it's something that I am looking for a laugh or whatever in horror comedy, then I am looking for that balance of kind of light and dark. In terms of in general, I really appreciate, characters that aren't just there to be whatever fodder, that they are going through their own thing. I really appreciate attention to environment, seasons and things like that. Right now, it's not a Christmas book. It's actually focused around Thanksgiving-ish. I'm reading The Only Good Indians, and it's so good. Oh my gosh, it's one of the best books I've read, hands down, this year. About these Blackfeet men's experiences from a hunt that happened before Thanksgiving in their youth, and now they're being haunted by this thing in retaliation. And just to see like their own life experiences and their own blend of like cynicism and cultural background and like trying to improve themselves or not. It's just kind of that weird existential, I don't know, like I have a lot of empathy for them, but I also, there's this terror about the thing that's coming after them, and that, they really can't change that because this has already happened in the past. And maybe it happened because of one reason, and maybe it happened because of another. But just the use of environment, the hunt scene is pretty graphic, but the way that the author uses weather and environment and like the reservation setting, and he's very, very good at going from character to character. It's not really head hopping. He really changes it off well. So you get really a full experience of, what the time of year and what their own situations are meaning to these people. So for me, I want to be able to feel a connection with the characters. Having been through personal trauma and things during, traditional December and times like that myself, I appreciate when people will acknowledge that it isn't always a good time of year, and that build up and things like that, and use of the environment and good settings as well.
How about you, Jonathan?
For me, it's all about character growth, and it's hard to find a more startling character arc than Scrooge. From where you meet him to where he is, and then the epilogue hinting of the fact that he's even gone further with it. But most of these stories have some sort of revelatory moment, and to some degree a redemptive moment, though it's often secular. It doesn't have to be a religious redemptive moment, but just somebody who has made bad choices and is given that chance to make things right. And growing up in the kind of neighborhood I grew up in, everybody at some point made bad choices, and the ones who were able to take that as a doorway into making better choices, a doorway into a better life, that's amazing. I mean, those are the kind of stories I love to read. Those are the kind of stories I love to tell. And A Christmas Carol, I mean, most of the characters by the end of that story have had a definite shift forward in arc. Even Marley, because he's managed somehow to get the powers that be to allow him to go and make this change for Scrooge. And I can't help but think that this is going to play well for Marley. I love that potential for growth that you have in stories like this. It's the magic implied by whatever holiday you're associating it with. But it gives you more opportunity for a payoff without it being about people calling you out as corny, because Christmas stories are allowed to be a little corny. And because you have that kind of as a given, you can then play with the model a little more and be corny, but find your way of making that as grounded and as character real as possible. So that's what draws me to it.
How about you, Samantha?
I like what Jonathan was saying about the corniness. Is like, I think it goes into that Charlie Brown kind of sincerity, right? That like, it's corny, but it's heartfelt. You're not putting on corniness as a way to make fun of it. It's actually very personally felt. And I think that's part of what gets me in some of these kinds of stories. And I was also thinking that why horror, earlier Lisa was talking about the darkness and the cold, and that's definitely a part of things. It's like, regardless of the holidays that happen to take place here, I feel like we have these holidays in a secular sense. We have these holidays because of the darkness and the cold, where we're giving ourselves something bright and colorful and exciting to focus on, instead of like, what was that noise? Was that a wolf? And so that darkness and the cold is definitely part of what horror can capitalize on. I was thinking another movie that got me, that I don't remember that it particularly has any connection to Christmas, but it felt like winter the whole time, was Let the Right One In. Do you guys know that one? Vampire movie? Yeah. And I have a thing for evil children. So I'm raising two of them myself, actually. But so that probably accounts for some of why I love it. But there's scenes where you can just like see the breath of the characters because it's cold, and you can only kind of see them because we're only lit by this little sliver of moon in a starless night. And those kinds of moments just really give me the creeps, and I think capitalize fully on what December has to offer us as humans, at least in my part of the world.
How about you, Lisa?
I'm the most shallow of the bunch, apparently. So I don't think that I care for Christmas or horror and comedy, at least not all the time. It has to be, Gremlins is a special thing. I don't know anyone that doesn't at least chuckle once or twice during Gremlins. Come on. I refer to people as Gremlins during the year. So that's just what it is. But in a general sense.
And I thought that was just me.
But you're Gizmo. We got to make sure that you don't stay up past midnight and all those other things we know that should not happen to you. But the issue for me is, we have a tradition is that we wrap most of the Christmas presents on Christmas Eve after everybody has gone to bed. And now as people are getting older, going to bed, it's just getting later and later. And I'm just like, why don't I just stay up all night? If you all don't want to go to bed, but it's the tradition. But when we do that, we watch Christmas horror movies, or something around the season horror movies, and inevitably Krampus comes on. You can't avoid Krampus at all. But I'm like, let's see the slasher movie, Silent Night, Bloody Night. I'm very shallow here. I want the blood on the snow. I want the people who can never run away because they're cold, you know what I mean? And they're screaming, and there's Christmas lights being wrapped around their neck. Something silly. I want silliness, and it's not like supposed to be funny, but it is funny to me when I'm rapping and I look up and I'm like, look at this fool. That's what I'm looking for. And any other time during the year, I'm telling you, I want to think about the movie, and it needs to, there needs to be some sort of subplot that's just, you can't identify. No, I don't really want that with my Christmas horror. Isn't that strange? I want the silliest slasher that I can find. So I don't know what that says. That says a lot about me, actually. I guess, I don't know. I think that because we watch a lot of Christmas movies that are not necessarily horror movies, right? I have never written, now that I've said this today, I've never written a horror movie that was Christmas focused, and now I probably should, because this was an interesting discussion that gave me some ideas. But for me, when I'm looking at it, I'm looking for entertainment value only, and that entertainment value I don't want to invest a whole lot of time in, just as it is. I want to drink the eggnog, play with the wrapping paper, tell the cat to stop chewing the ribbon, and watch someone running in the snow.
It's all a form of catharsis, though. It's whether it's like fun or whatever. It's all some level of catharsis.
Definitely.
So looking at this and kind of diving a little bit deeper, with the stories you create, the stories you tell that relate back to the holidays, what are the reasons that drew you to then create that story? Is it your own experience? Is it processing family? Is it the idea of, if I have to go back into another mall ever again? What is it that kind of draws you to the stories you're creating around the holidays? So Jonathan, I'm gonna throw this one to you first.
All right. Well, here's the thing. Going to get a little dark before I explain the story. I mentioned that I had grown up in an abusive household. The time of year when none of my sisters or I were being abused was around Christmas. It seems like father just backed off around that time. So even though a lot of the year was dark, that was an opportunity where something magical could happen. And each year we would think, well, that means it's stopped now, it's done. And, he got his Christmas message, of course it wasn't the case, but each year we had that I guess you can call it a Charlie Brown optimism, who, despite everything else, is the most optimistic character in that whole series. He remains optimistic, even to the point where people fool him about it, but he's still optimistic. And I admire that level of optimism. It speaks to a great degree of inner toughness that people are not often given credit for. So the first story I wrote that was set on Christmas was a zombie story. Two brothers, going through a blizzard, trying to escape the zombies. Zombies are slowing down a little bit because it's getting cold, but everyone they know is dead. Everything they know, infrastructure has fallen. That's it. A few houses that have generators are still lit, but most of them are, so remote and boarded up against them. And they're in this storm, and they find a house where not only is the door open, but the table is set with a beautiful Christmas dinner. There are presents to unwrap, but the house is empty. And to them, it's an incredible gift because they're starving to death, and then now they have food and warmth and even presents to open, all the things that would technically be denied them in a catastrophe of that level. And it's there for them. But what's implied is the family died. That's why they're not there. There's even a scene where the kid sees a Santa Claus in the yard, and he's like, "Oh, Santa's here." And then the brother realizes that it may have somebody dressed as Santa Claus, but they're no longer alive, and they're, let's lock the door and shut the lights and so on. But they're safe for now. They're fed for now. And somehow the optimism of continuing to run away, because if you're fleeing from what seems to be a catastrophe, if you continue to flee, you must have the belief somewhere in you that flight will take you somewhere safe. And in most zombie stories, which for adults, zombie fiction tends to end badly. For kids, there's usually a little more optimism. These two brothers found something that's probably going to save their lives. They may stay there for a long time. The place is stocked with food. To them, it is a happy Christmas, possibly the last Christmas on Earth. So I wrote that as a way of exploring, that level of optimism, despite all of the forces that are trying to point to the contrary. So, that to me was a call to write a fun story. I loved writing that story. I had a great time writing it.
Sounds interesting.
How about you, Samantha?
So I haven't really written much horror that's holiday themed, at least not winter holiday themed. Like my most holiday themed horror was in Slay. This was an anthology from Mocha Memoirs Press. And my story in there is, I call it my Passover vampire story. Its real title is His Destroyer, which is a little more accurate to tone. But and I've written a Christmas story for the menopausal superheroes, which got a little more violent than I expected. But yeah, so far I haven't really written holiday horror myself. I've read lots of other people's and enjoyed it, but haven't written it myself.
Well, out of that, what's spoken to you then?
Well, holidays are horror. I mean, if you're going to tell me you've got this perfect family that never has any weird conflict and scary stuff that comes out during holidays, I'm going to call you a liar. But I just don't know any families like that. And so when you're in proximity with generations of people and all the conflicts between them, horror is going to come out, so I think that maybe it's not the holiday, maybe it's the proximity, that you have to have all these disparate angles of a family mash up against each other because you're all brought together by whatever it was. I guess it could just as easily be a wedding or a funeral or a baby's birth or something. But more reliably, year by year by year, we're brought together by whatever holidays our family celebrates.
How about you, El Marie?
Same. I haven't written a horror story that was related to the holidays, but I do write every now and then a story that's related to the cold. The cold obviously resonates with me. I don't like it. I've told you before, but cold and dark. And in psychological horror, that can mean a lot of things. You know, cold and dark can definitely be physical, but it could also be a state of mind. And so I like to explore, you know, what time of year can do to people and how they interact with others, and you know what that interaction will yield. So there was interesting, and it's not, I don't even know if it's a horror movie. I shouldn't say horror. I don't know if it's a holiday movie, but it touches on what Samantha just mentioned about getting together with family. And it's not family per se, but it's like your created family. And it was, I want to call it, The Invitation is what I want to call it. Courtney B. Vance is in this movie. And this is not a new movie. I want to say it was the late 90s, maybe even mid. Where people get together and they're friends and they get together and debate different topics, and then they meet someone and they invite them to dinner and they have them debate this topic. And at the end of the night, you know, you may be killed because your argument was nonsense and they found it to be nonsense. Then they would take you out. But that's reflective of what all these holiday gatherings are like. Not necessarily that you're killing people, but the like you mentioned, people coming from we're related by blood or marriage, but that may be the only time we ever see each other. So therefore we're not necessarily friends. We're not close. You know, we might've been as children, but we're not necessarily close now. We're strangers coming together to have this meal. And I have been in situations where I'm listening to someone talk and I'm going, my God, what? You know, what did you say? Honestly. And I'm just like, someone's going to say it before me. So let them do it and I'll just sit back and watch. But what comes of that? And that's what I'd like to touch upon when I write my psychological horror, is what happens after this moment of strangeness. What's next? So I do write a lot of that. And it's the we're strangers getting together and sharing a meal, but we don't know each other. So all these odd things can happen. I like to set it at night, this dinner, of course. And I like to set it in the cold because you're not, you know, all the activity happens in the house. People aren't as open to running outside and running through a field in the snow. They typically run upstairs or run to the basement or try to hide in the closet or do something silly like hide under a bed. So, you know, that's the thing that people do in the cold and before they end up outside. So that's where I said it. I mean, that's what happens with me, but they're not necessarily holiday themed, but for tone at least, it works for me.
And make sure to tell them to speak up so you've got time to take notes. I mean, you may as well, if you got to go through the family dinner that way, you may as well get the notes for it to be able to use in the next story.
They're lucky I don't grab popcorn and sit back. I mean, I'm just like.
How about you, Selah?
Oh gosh. So I have a short out on Kindle called Candles, and it's also a Christmas zombie story. And for me, it really riffed on December seems to be the month that if anything terrible or weird is going to happen, it will probably happen then. I've had breakups. I've had really odd illnesses. My grandfather died pretty close to Christmas. I've lost pets. I've accidentally been set on fire during the Christmas Eve service. Like, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Did you say you were set on fire?
Accidentally set on fire during the Christmas Eve service. I was singing in the choir as a teen, and the kid in back of me leaned a candle over and it caught my hair. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And my dad was a minister and I guess didn't see it and like walked on by.
Oh no, that's horrible. That's horrible.
That's a great story though.
Right?
Yeah, I know. Like it's one of those things that it's like, yeah, I still bring that up. Like you really didn't see that, huh? Okay.
The big glowing orange flame that
Yeah.
he's like,
I had to get like headshots done the week after because I was a theater major, and thank God, like it singed like part of my eyebrow off and like a chunk of hair, but we managed to like get it done. But yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not sure I'd go back out during December. I just would,
I'm just gonna
call
stay
me in
home.
February.
Like whole at this point, like I just stay in my little corner and survive the month.
Yep,
So-
it's Thanksgiving. I'll see you in February. I mean,
exactly. Like if I can get to like the 27th or so, I'm usually good. But I don't know. Like for me, it's about like finding those bright spots in the darkness. I kind of always have it equated with like using candlelight to find your way home.
Or you like burning head to find
Yeah,
your
or a burning head.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great torch. Yeah.
that's one way to be a wick. I mean,
That is yeah. So for my story, it came about as a random idea, and I kind of expanded it. It's a short, but still, it's about from the viewpoint of a mother who zombie apocalypse. She's holed up with her two sons. She's lost her husband and another child due to zombies. And she's met up with another survivor who happens to be a minister. Kind of riffing on like my background. I'm not practicing all that much anymore, but kind of riffing on my background and going with that and thinking of like, well, who's like, we always see like these action hero types in a zombie apocalypse. What about the other people, the regular people? So, mother, minister, kids. And they're holed up in like a shed with, they know the zombies are out there. They're not quite sure how close. They don't really have a whole lot of protection besides like a rifle. And it's Christmas. So they rig together an Advent wreath with the little materials that they have. And they're talking like through the mother's viewpoint. It's about like the symbolism of the candles and how she's still trying to find some sort of meaning in that moment for her sons and, her, this person that she's grown very close to. And it's trying to find that hope. It's trying to cling to that kind of last shred of humanity in a really inhuman situation, not really knowing what's going to happen. And then it turns into a little bit of gift of the magi, very light, like trying to scrounge up gifts for the boys. And then ending with, I won't give it away, but the mother making the decision with what she has of the best gift she can give to the other three. So, yeah. So that was, and for me, that was dealing with a lot of that mix of light and dark. It is a more serious piece. I've also done a piece that isn't necessarily holiday. It's very winter themed. I have a really weird soft spot for like pioneer rural America. And although like the Laura Ingalls books are trash and not accurate, it really got me interested in reading the time period. So I wrote this story called Mooner, and it's through Mocha Memoirs Press. It's on Kindle. And it's about a vampire kind of stalking this lumber camp, and it's plays a lot with the winter themes, the dead cold of winter, kind of the harshness of what that reality means for the lumber workers, because it was an extremely dangerous profession during a dangerous time of year. And, what could turn this random thing into this creature, and then who is making use of him for their own moral high ground. So I like playing with the environment a lot in that one, that kind of cold, and then what's really human and what's not as well. My dream is to one day write a really sarcastic, like Christmas romance version of like a Hallmark movie, but with like the Yule cat eating people. So maybe one day I'll get that done.
Well, in the Krampus book, that way.
Yeah.
Because of my extreme hatred in finding Elf on the Shelf so creepy, I have my version in there. They're called Ned and Nancy and the Nook. And my editor, she was like, yeah, that's just extraordinarily creepy what you do with them. And I was like, yeah, but it's YA. I can only make it so bad. She's ramp it up. Just ramp it up.
I did one Krampus piece on my blog, but I had it like where he absorbed the souls of the naughty kids he stole. And my aunt found it and was like, do we need to talk? And I was like, probably. But
At this point, it's too late.
Oh, my goodness.
It's too late. Sorry.
It took me about 10 years for the story to congeal, and I was like, all right, it's one and done, and it's out, and I got to write 2 more now, but that's
Yeah.
okay. So looking at, kind of these holiday stories, because, one of the big themes that we always see is that idea of family, whether it's found family, blood family, and it's either having to get together with them or it's that absence. And it's when we see that, it is such an element, because I mean, at the core of every story is the characters. It's the people we're connecting with in the story. And so often it's a matter of how do we use the holidays and family traditions or other traditions and how they kind of come into creating conflict. And to me, finding fantasy and horror and the ability to take and combine the two and playing with folklore and seeing how that comes into play is always one of my most fun things to do, which is part of the reason I wrote that particular book. I know everybody here has a particular love of folklore. So what is your favorite piece of folklore that ties to this particular time of year? So Samantha, I'm going to start with you.
You start with me when I can't think of one.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to put you on the
Folklore
spot.
related to this time of year.
Well, other than
don't have-
Gremlins.
Well, yeah, but they weren't traditionally tied to this part of year. It's that particular movie that tied them to this time of year. Well, I mean, I guess if we want to go all the way back to childhood, we could talk about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and what a horror fest that story is. Where the adults are actively abusing a child and we're all supposed to find it's amusing. Have you watched that one as an adult, by the way? Whoa.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly can't think of a particular mythology for this time of year. My own traditions for this time of year are history, not mythology. So
How about you, Lisa?
Again, with the lighthearted approach that I have towards this season, it's just not as deep. But I will say, I'll go back to what I talked about before about the night before Christmas and the concept of Santa Claus coming in through the chimney and knowing if you're naughty or nice. What, are you watching me all year? What kind of stalker thing is this? How did you get in my house? I grew up in a house that had an alarm. So I was always like, how are they getting in the house? And I'm like, wait, someone can get in the house? You know what I mean? So the terror that I had was not associated with, oh, how cute. I was just thinking, no. How? They know the code to the alarm? So you mean that it can come in anytime during the year? Because that's how they know if I'm naughty or nice, because they're watching me. Like, I was entirely too logical about this. But as a child, and unfortunately it's true, but the fact is, we tell our kids that, right? We tell our kids this, and we have them thinking that Santa Claus is in all the different malls, and Santa Claus, knows everything going on and we watch Polar Express. We do have we like the holiday. We really do like Christmas. We watch Polar Express every year. And just as a funny thing, the kid gets in trouble. The last kid, he's like, I didn't do it. I hit just the sadness in this poor child's voice. I'm just like, this little kid, someone is watching him. He's been bad. Now his whole Christmas is ruined and he has to wait till next year. And the elves were mean. I'm just like, oh. So when I think about, if I try to really focus on these holiday movies and the messages that or in some of the stories and the messages that are being passed down to kids, and I don't know, I sometimes think maybe we should have lightened up on the whole Christmas or the whole Santa idea. Christmas can mean other things, and somehow we are pulling away. And the holiday season in and of itself can mean other things instead of this, let's only be good for this gift we're going to get from this creep that's been looking at us all year long, like from behind trees, and writes down a list. You know what I mean? So it's creepy. I creep myself out by this whole conversation. Thank you for that question, Jim.
You're welcome.
Myself out.
Selah?
I'm going to take the opposite stance of Lisa and say we need more anti-Santas because everyone else has them and we don't, and it stinks. So, I mean, there's Krampus, there's Belsnickel, there's, oh, I never get the name right, Nectaruprecht or something like that. There's, oh my gosh, Iceland has 13 trolls that each take turns stalking your house before Christmas. I mean,
Oh no,
and a
no.
man-eating and giant test, and a cat that eats you if you don't contribute to the weaving industry. So I feel like we're asleep behind the wheel. I mean, but I mean that's like the one area where I'm like, yes, bring on the schlock, bring on the anti-Santas. I am here for it. I am there for the Krampus parades. I am there for the monsters. It just, I don't know. It makes sense because like you were saying, like, I mean, it is kind of weird that we have, someone essentially just saying like bribing children to be good. And I don't know why it makes more sense to have like put the utter fear of God into kids to fear something. But I do kind of like the parallel, So I mean, it became what I've liked as a kid, probably not, but as an adult, I find it wildly entertaining. So I'm always on the lookout for like, collecting news stories of anti-Santas.
Nice.
How about you, Jonathan?
Well, there's a Welsh character, Mary. I can never pronounce it. It's Lwyd. I don't think Welsh is actually a pronounceable language. But it's a ghost or possibly a zombie or revenant of some sort of a mare, and it goes around on Christmas Eve, and she rises from the dead in winter, roams through the streets with her entourage of also risen creatures, and tries to get into your house, and it's played out by people who dress up or who have an actual horse skull on a pole, and they go around and they go through the streets and so on. And the whole idea is to either trick you, encourage you, or whatever to get into your house. Now, the fun thing is on New Year's Eve, in order to prevent this creature from essentially polluting your next year, you have to engage it in a rhyming battle. Now, why this has not become the centerpiece for a rap Christmas movie, I don't know, but it's there to be done, and I'm buying the first ticket for it.
I have literally, there's a Welsh community near me, and I've literally tried to be like, do you do this? Can I get in on this? And I have never been able to figure out if this is still a thing or not.
Well, it's funny. I wrote, before I started fiction, I wrote 5 books of supernatural folklore, nonfiction books. And this is one that just after the last book got printed, somebody told me about that. I was on book tour in England. We were in Wales, and somebody told me that story, and I'm like, that's the coolest thing I ever. And I keep thinking that I'll do another folklore book just because of that, because it's so cool. Maybe I'll do a holiday themed folklore book, but I've got to incorporate that into one of my novels sometime. But I'm afraid that it would result in me having to either write rhyme or rap. In either case, I would be unarmed in that particular battle. So, but it's a cool bit of folklore.
Well, we're kind of getting up on time here, but I am going to throw this out there. So I do want to know, what is the one thing you are looking to in horror this holiday season? What's the one thing you really are looking forward to, whether it's a classic tradition or something new that's coming out and you think everybody needs to check it out? So who wants to take that one first? I always love the puzzled looks. That makes great for airtime.
Well, I bought a couple of copies of a graphic novel from, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. There's a DC character named Lobo, who is this like super violent character, and he fought Santa Claus to the death in this comic, and it's so awesome, and it's so over the top. I mean, they're every time you think they're not going to go there, they're like, oh no, we're going to go there and way up there. It's so great. And I every year I try to give out a couple of copies of this to my friends who really have as skewed a view of holidays as I do. And so yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, because I always read that one Christmas Eve. It's my tradition. I'm staying by it.
I will admit, one of our Christmas traditions is to watch Bad Santa and Scrooged.
Scrooge is amazing. It's an amazing film.
Yeah.
Come on, El Marie. You got something else that you haven't told us about with that Rapping Night?
What I'm telling you, no, it's usually just let me turn on like whatever I'm looking at. It could be any Prime, Shutter, Netflix, whatever. Who's got the weirdest slasher movie? So, and I'm honestly, that's my answer. I'm honestly looking forward to the next creepy thing I can find. Doesn't matter to me if it came from 1968 or last year. Like I literally just enjoy that silly, because slashers are not, to me, they're just kind of, there's low investment. We all know what's going to happen here. So you can just turn it on and watch it. And I don't know, I love that. So I'm really kind of looking forward, and I never look ahead of time. That's the funny thing about it. Like I could go look now and try to come up with, I never do that. We come downstairs, we got all the paper and everything, the eggnogs in hand and the remotes in hand going, what's the next weird movie? So I'm looking forward to that. And that is an odd tradition if you think about it. Like you say it out loud, you're like, really? You watch slasher movies on Christmas Eve? But no, honestly, I mean, I think that it's like, you asked, and that's the truth. So I definitely am excited about the next creepy thing I can find. So yeah, suggestions I'm definitely open to.
Santa Claus versus the Martians.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a
So
minute.
teaching and momming often are not a great combination, but one way that they are a great combination is that the kid and I tend to have time off at about the same time.
Yes.
And we definitely like to movie marathon. Like, last summer we were doing watch all the Disney animated features in order, like, start with with Snow White and work our way forward and watch how the styles and everything changed. And currently my youngest is 14 and is hitting an interest in horror. So I don't know what exactly we're going to watch with our days off, but I know we will watch some. We over gosh, what holiday was that? I don't know. Recently we started watching both the Jason series and the Michael Myers, the Halloween. Yeah. And so I'd like for us to continue one or the other of those. It's a whole different thing rewatching them with a young person and seeing what doesn't play well for a person who was born after the century changed, and what still does.
If I can add in there, Samantha, that's funny because my just becoming 14-year-old is into horror, but like not as much as me. We watch Halloween on Halloween every Halloween. So we have now moved to Halloween 2, and I commenced to don't look. Oh my God, can you see? Because there's a scene in there that's like, no, you can't watch that with me. I mean, you're too young to be watching that, and we can't watch that part.
Yeah, we had an awkward moment when the young one and I watched Midsummer together.
Oh, I cut it off because I'm like, I can't.
Well, I hadn't seen it before. I didn't know it was coming. Same,
I didn't either, and the one that's not quite 14 caught a little bit more than should have been, and I was like, this movie's going off. I can't. But yes, it is great. I have to just chime in there because that is a unique moment, because the movies do become different when you're watching it with a teen and you're an adult.
Selah?
I'm gonna lose all my street cred. I'm like the person that likes the fluffy stuff for Christmas. So Christmas Eve, I always do It's a Wonderful Life, and it's my favorite movie, and I no shit. But so I do tend to do the cutesy stuff. I'm a Charlie Brown fanatic and all of that, but I love the Marvel Zombie Christmas Carol book. Love it. It's a really awesome, unique take on it. Love it. I don't know. I feel like I just got like AMC Plus. So I'll probably look through, because I think Shudder is through there, and see what else I can find. I'm always like down to like explore new stuff around this time of year. So it's whatever I can stumble upon. But definitely Marvel Zombies. I'll probably watch Scrooge too, which is, I feel like you either love it or hate it. It's the musical version of Christmas Carol, but Ebenezer goes to hell, and it's pretty hilarious. So I have to give props to that one too.
And It's a Wonderful Life has a darkness to it too, because the bad guy gets away at the end. He skates,
Yeah. And I mean, it goes right up to the brink. So you're right.
They did a sequel or the alternate ending to it on Saturday Night Live once, where they realize that and then go in and kill the bad guy at the end. It was a great, one of the few Saturday Night Live skits that was fantastic.
Well, yeah, the heart of that story is pretty dark. I mean, we start with somebody who's considering ending their life.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I kind of forget that, 'cause I just like think of like the yay, everyone has meaning at the end, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and
Jimmy on the bridge sells it for me. I believe it.
And he fails all of his ambitions.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that all of the holiday specials we see, even Charlie Brown, have an inherent darkness to them. Because even Charlie, the eternal optimist, is still getting screwed over at every turn.
Yeah, I would like to write the novel of Charlie Brown as an adult who decides to find his sister Lucy and kill her in some horrible way for all the things. That would be a great novel to write. I wish I could get the
Oh my gosh.
You've seen the meme about apocalyptic Charlie Brown, right?
I'm not saying I would do that in real life. I'm saying it would make a good novel. We're storytellers. Come on, be with me here.
That's right. Don't forget that part.
Yeah.
It's easier to kill them on the page than it is to get rid of the bodies. So, with that note, let's go back around and let everybody know where to find you and all the good stuff you got going on and what people need to add to that to be read pile and give as gifts this holiday season. And because I can, I'm going to go in reverse order. So, Jonathan, how about you?
Okay, well, if you spell my last name right, you can find me anywhere. It's Maberry, Jonathan Mayberry. JonathanMayberry.com, Jonathan Mayberry on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those places. My latest, I have two books out, two collections out. One is Empty Graves, collection of zombie short stories. And we have two of these now that have been optioned for TV movies, which is really bizarre. And Joe Ledger Special Ops, 2-volume short story collection of my thriller character. But you can find me anywhere. If you're a writer, if you're out there and you're a writer, if you go to my website, there's a page on that website called Free Stuff for Writers. It has everything from a comic book script, I think it was one of my Captain America scripts, to query letters and all sorts of stuff. Go grab what you need, share it with your other writer friends. And also, if you're a writer, I have the thing called the Writers Coffee House that meets on the first Sunday of every month, except this December, because I'll be out of town. But it's a free 2-hour networking session for writers, just exchanging ideas and leads and things like that. So come check it out.
Selah?
Oh gosh. So I'm restarting a lot of things. I do have some stuff out. I went through some experiences where I had to pretty much revamp my writing career. So I do have Candles and Moon are out on Kindle. I've got some other more adventure fantasy oriented stuff as well. So if you need stuff for your Kindle, you can get that. SelahJanel.com. That is SelahJanel.com. That has pretty much links to wherever you can find me. I am author SJ on Facebook, Selah Janel on Twitter, and Selah Janel 99 on Instagram. But I'm kind of rebuilding things from the ground up, but I have a lot of exciting things in the works. So, keep an eye out.
Elle Marie?
I guess you can find me on Twitter at elmariewood1 and on my website, elmariewood.com, Facebook as well, elmariewood. I have book 2 of my Realm series. It's Realm. Did I say Realm? It sounded like I didn't. The Realm series called Cacophony just came out in October. And talking about supernatural, this one's fully based in supernatural and sort of alternate reality, sort of sci-fi horror kind of mashup. So it's an interesting, fun time, and it is book 2. So if you haven't read that one, the Realm 1 is out as well, and that's a lot of fun. If you would like to learn how to write horror fiction, science fiction, fantasy, learn about business, get taught by Jim about business, and taught by several other leading folks in the industry. I just launched the Speculative Fiction Academy, which is the shirt he was talking about in the very beginning of the show. If you go to speculativeffictionacademy.com, you can learn more.
Samantha?
So hello again, I'm Samantha Bryant and I am under a dog, so I can't go grab a copy of my novel to show you, but I write the Menopausal Superhero series. There are 3 novels, a couple of novellas, and a short story collection. And here in a couple weeks, or maybe by the time this airs, the 4th novel will be out. Be the Change is the new one. Going Through the Change is the first novel. And those are a great deal of fun for me to write and let me deal with all my anxiety about being a woman in contemporary society and aging and all that fun stuff. And besides that, I write horror. There's a pile of it here behind me. None of it is under just my name because so far my horror is all short. So it's in multi-author anthologies. But you can find me at samanthabryant.com because I'm just that creative with naming my website. And I'm on most other things as Samantha B. Writer, just the letter B in the middle, Samantha B. Writer. And if you Google Samantha Bryant, make sure you add the word author. Otherwise, you're going to get Colin Hanks's wife. And I don't look quite the same in a ball gown.
And I've had the pleasure to be your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamesbnettles.com, authoressentials.net. Here, of course, at continualconvention.com, over at the Speculative Fiction Academy. You can find me, creeping around on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all sorts of different places. If you want some nice YA Christmas horror, there's the Krampus Clause written under is James B. McDonald. And hopefully by the Christmas season, it will be out. My next release is a piece in Fairy Films, We Folk on the Big Screen, where my piece is on Dune and the 1984 version of Dune and how it fits into the folklore. Other than that, we want to say happy holidays to everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us. And make sure you find that slasher flick for Christmas Eve. And we'll see everybody soon.
Bye.
Bye, folks.